Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be looking at, or for the second part of the lecture, you already had one lecture that you've already clicked on, is we're going to be talking about interest groups, as well as what is an interest group, what is a lobbyist, and what is a PAC. And these things have popped up in some of the other things you've done in this unit, but I just wanted to highlight what is the point of interest groups. And it sort of ties back to what you did on Monday. Monday you read a Federalist paper called Federalist 10, which is, fun fact, my favorite Federalist paper, because it deals with factions. Now, factions can be good or bad. Now, Madison in Federalist 10 talks about that factions are, in this sense, are groups of people that could sometimes be running contrary to the common good. Now, what is the common good? The common good can be defined as what's best for the country, what's best for the nation, or in this case, what's best for the majority, or if the majority is the problem, what can we do about it? So in Federalist 10, he lays out an argument that says essentially that factions are always going to exist. People are going to subdivide into things. We talked about this all the way back at the beginning when we mentioned nations. Nations are things that tie people together. Now, we didn't look at them as in a motivating interest towards something, but we looked at it in the sense that if the basketball team's together, or the football team, or the chess club, or NHS, or anything of those can all be factions, and they can all be nations because they're united by something. Now, factions are united by a pursuit of something, some kind of interest. Hence, we can see where interest group comes from. But in Madison's case in Federalist 10, he says, okay, these factions are always going to be there. So what can we do about them? Well, we know sometimes factions can run counter to the public good. So what can we do? Well, we could either eliminate the causes of faction or control its effects. Then he talks about how if we limit the causes of faction, we can deprive people of the freedom to express themselves. Or we can try to instill in everyone the exact same feelings. Like teach them and manipulate them in such a degree that they all believe the same things. Now, of course, Madison says neither one of those is attainable. You can't make everyone think the same. And if you're creating a free society, you can't impose your order to control if people can have interests or different interests or create groups that feel different ways. So if we can't remove the source of how factions developed, then we can control its effects. And that's where Federalist 10 goes in then, that he's saying in Federalist 10 that the United States is a novel thing in the sense that democracies or representative governments only really exist in small areas. But because our country is so large, what it's going to do is it's going to carve up, because our country is extended, he says, it's going to carve up where those factions are located. And people are going to get spread out across the United States. And it's going to be very difficult for them to get together to mobilize anything against the common good. He then also says that because we have layers or structure to our government, they have, way back when I talked about checks and balances, and I mentioned how Mallory wanted to take over the world, and hopefully she hasn't moved very much farther in that direction. But if she has, one of the things that Madison says is that factions are going to be controlled in our country because of the extended nature of it, to keep people from colluding together to create groups, but also that the many different layers of government is going to confound them so that they don't get to push their agenda. He then talks about how, he mentions earlier in the paper about how do you control majority and minority factions. And then he says the minority faction is controlled by the majority, but how do we protect the minority from the majority? And that's how those two things come into play. Hopefully you got some of that out of there. If not, review it and look at it again to see what I'm talking about. Now, the reason why I said all of that and the reason why we started with all that is interest groups are a formalized faction. Interest groups exist in our government. Interest groups exist in our country. They are found in many walks of life. They are found in professional organizations, student organizations, anything that has people gathering together to promote certain things. Some interest groups can be very highly motivated to impact government policy. Some are very low motivated to do so. But what we're going to focus on here are the ones that are more highly motivated. So what is an interest group? Well, there are 3 keys to an interest group. Okay, they're number 1, they are a group of people that share a common goal. And that goal is used to influence government. They've been around forever, and that's what they're going to do is how do we get government to do what we want to protect our interests or to promote our interests? They're usually concerned, number 2, they're usually concerned with a few issues. An interest group that focuses on all interests is going to have its argument diluted. So these interest groups, or powerful interest groups, tend to focus on key issues or narrow issues. And number 3, the third key is that their strength is based upon, or their political power is based upon their numbers. The more people that support that interest group, that show active participation, the more powerful that interest group can be in pushing government, whether at a state level or a national level, to do or accomplish its goals. Now, why do people join interest groups? Well, why not? If you are passionate about something, you want to promote that something. So you look for other people to do that with. Now, Madison said our country can limit that by spreading everyone out, well, and only allow good interest groups to form. Modern day society would show that any interests, good or bad, can form because it's a lot easier to communicate and get people together. Heck, we're communicating in a way that Madison couldn't even fathom back in the day, that I am going to give you a visual and we can talk across distance in real time. Well, now this isn't in real time, but we do have the capability to do that, of course. So people who want to promote something, that's why people join. People of similar beliefs and attitudes join interest groups. And these can be anything from anime and manga appreciation, or the National Rifle Association, or the Sierra Club, or the National Wildlife Federation, or the National Wrestling Foundation or Federation, or any kind of interest. People want to associate. We like associating with things. We like having labels, like saying, oh, I'm an annual pass holder, or I guess we don't really do that for food things, but all of you have associations probably on your cell phones if you have apps, or if you've joined or like and subscribe like you did to my channel, maybe, that you are part of the same interests. So those are reasons why people join interest groups. There's also another reason. Some interest groups provide social functions, social gatherings. It gets like-minded people together, whether virtually or in person, and they can talk about things that they're passionate about. And so that's why people join, that we like associations. What kind of interest groups are there? Many interest groups across the sun. I don't even know if that's really a thing, across the sun. All right, we'll go with it. Okay. There are interest groups, of course, that are tied to businesses and tied to industries, tied to environmental issues, civic issues, all kinds of interest groups. I'm not going to go into them. There are too many to talk about. Okay. So what do they do? What do interest groups, now that we've got people together and they want to promote stuff, how do they actually do that? Well, they do that by trying to stimulate interest in their pursuit. Right? They need to increase visibility and promote the issues that they feel are important. Okay? They try to promote things that have shared attitudes or shared values with their members. And it's not geographic necessarily, but that is what they're trying to get their views across. And it seems like I'm repeating myself. And so I will move forward a little bit there. Okay? So how do they do that? Well, they do that through, one of the biggest things they do is they put offices in government centers, whether it's down in Phoenix or Washington, D.C. Interest groups, if they get powerful enough, promote the ideas through physical presence. Virtual works, but I don't know about you. I tend to not want to talk on the telephone. I'd rather text. I really don't watch tons of videos, like you're probably having a hard time sometimes watching mine. And so you don't pay attention. In person is where it's at. So interest groups create offices in regions, and then they employ people to go talk to congressmen, to talk to government positions to promote their interests, right? It is hard to remain unbiased. And I say bias as if it's a bad thing. We would know that Burke would say bias or prejudice is a good thing. Mill would say prejudice or bias is a bad thing because it can close you down. It depends on how you view. I do know that if someone's in your life more often, you tend to be influenced by them more than someone that you've only talked on the telephone. And that's the idea behind lobbyists. Now, where does that term come from? A person that's employed by an interest group is called a lobbyist. Way back in the day, congressmen used to not have their own houses. They stayed in boarding houses or in hotels during government sessions. People who wish to promote their views would wait for them at the hotel. The most natural place to wait for them would be in a lobby, and therefore they are a lobbyist. Now that then evolved over time to being that they are lobbying or promoting an issue, but the root form is these are people that are part of an interest and they are tied and they're waiting for you in the hotel lobby. It is true. You should look it up. Not now, but sometime. Okay. So they do that. They talk to people and promote their ideas in person by employing people called lobbyists to do that. Okay. They also promote or provide financial support to candidates to get into office. Now, those are done through what are called political action committees or PACs, PACS. Okay. PACs' sole purpose is to raise money and to use that money to support candidates. Now, in your elections assignment, you looked at ways that their candidates are limited or how candidate gets money for running for office. And PACs are one of those things too. They bring court cases to courts. They bring up issues. They sue. They do lawsuits. And you might think that's a bad thing, but it is a way to bring issues to the government and to create problems that either get reinforced through existing legislation and the judges say, no, this is where you find that, or it shows that where gaps are and then government can create new laws to fill those gaps. They publish their ideas through social media, through mailers to try to sway public opinion, and then use that public opinion to mobilize their constituents towards a particular goal. So they have a lot of functions. They're also watchdogs. And that's a weird term, watchdog. What do you want out of a watchdog, right? You want to make sure that the dog, well, if you're a watchdog, although you wouldn't be, well, maybe one of you, but if there were watchdogs, the whole point of the watchdog is that you want them to keep people from abusing your property. Interest groups serve as a watchdog on government to make sure that people are practicing ethically and that nobody is abusing things, because for every interest group that's pro something, there's probably an interest group against it, and they sort of serve as an informal check on each other to make sure no one's getting too much influence in government, or if they are, what the reason behind that is. Okay, and we do that through mobilizing our constituents, having a watchdog, demonstrate all these things. They do tons of things as an interest group. Now, what are their criticisms or their biggest problem? So the criticism on interest groups is sometimes their ability to influence government is out of proportion to their numbers. Depends on their funding, right? Someone who can afford a lobbyist in Washington or chooses to use funding to do that have much more access to our government officials than people who might have a similar size group and choose not to do that end up having. Okay, so sometimes an interest group has influence in our government way beyond its size or of its ability. Sometimes another criticism is it's hard to tell what exactly an interest group is working towards. There are some large-scale interest groups, AARP, which is the American Association of Retired People. Now, those people are advocating for issues for all retired people. But what does that really mean? Everyone's at some point gets to retire. Are they looking for health care? Are they working for driver privileges, pension reform? I don't know. we could, at least it's tied enough to retired people. So at least things that help promote those. But some other interest groups, it's harder to determine what exactly is their core issues that they're trying to do. Sometimes a interest group doesn't represent everyone who actually belongs. Just like we were saying with retired people, or let's say environmental clubs that you might join, maybe they promote one issue, but that's not really the issue why you joined. And so you're part of their enrollment, but you're not necessarily gung-ho for everything they're trying to accomplish. Which brings us to their biggest problem. Their biggest problem is what's called the free rider problem. Free rider problem. What is the free rider problem? Well, interest groups pride themselves on promoting certain issues. Interest groups' strength comes in their numbers as well as their pocketbooks, right? How much money they have. Now, they get that money by soliciting donations. They get that money through dues. And then they use that for different functions. Then they either do court cases, promote candidate, or try to get candidates elected, or they have lobbyists who push those issues towards government and try to get something accomplished. Their problem comes with the free rider problem. If all of that is necessary to achieve their goals, how do you get people to join when they also know they might get the benefit if they don't? Why pay $75 in fees or donate towards a cause when you might get that benefit if they achieve their goals? Let's look at retired people. Okay. Retired people want lower healthcare costs. Let's say they're on insulin. Let's say the AARP employs a lobbyist, uses the might of the numbers behind the AARP to mobilize their constituents to try to influence government and try to get government officials to pass something to control the price of insulin. And they accomplish it. Who gets the benefit? Yes, everyone who's in the AARP does, but so does everyone that needs insulin. So if I can get the benefit without joining, why do I need to join? That's their problem. How do you get, if your strength comes in your numbers, how do you get people off the fence to join your organization so that increases your enrollment, increases your funding to actually achieve those goals? That's the problem that interest groups face. So I know I threw a lot at you in this chapter, in this unit. You guys will be fine. Don't forget there's a test. Make sure all your assignments are done. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I hope to see you soon. Bye.